Hello, everybody. Adam Parks here with another episode of Receivables Roundtable. Today, I am here with my friend Sean Clark, who is with Provana. How are you doing today, Sean?
Doing great, Adam. How about you?
I cannot complain. Now, I know that you're kind of like a backroom mastermind in terms of developing technology and platforms across the industry. But for those in the audience that are not familiar with you as an individual, can you tell everybody a little bit about yourself and how you got to the seat that you're in today?
I sure can. Appreciate you having me on the program here. Looking forward to it. So coming out of college, I was actually a computer network engineer, which is really interesting amount of training about how you think about problems and dissect what you know and apply it towards customer needs. So kind of started as a computer network engineer and landed in the collection industry as a side hustle. It was an interesting way to make some money on the side and get into these little law firms that needed technology improvement, a server here, some workstations there, and found my way into a collection law firm in New York. Worked through building IT and software solutions for them, and then ultimately was running the firm for several years. So a lot of experience working with clients and end clients in the industry, lots of my peers and colleagues from whom I've learned just an immeasurable amount. And through that work at the law firm, came to know about this company called Provana, who had a single software solution at the time, a compliance software that was really a differentiator for me, for my issuer clients. And when I decided to change careers and move into Provana, it seemed like a great opportunity to say, like, how can we really start thinking about the software and technology needs of an industry that in many ways has kind of been resistant towards fast technology change, and kind of understanding what solutions we could bring.
Sure. I mean, that is definitely the receivables management industry is never quick to make a move, right? There's
Generally not.
long evaluation process, lots of attorneys and other things before technology starts to move forward. But now that you're there with Provana, can you tell us a little bit about what Provana does?
Yeah, absolutely. So Provana is a pretty interesting mix. You might even say kind of two sides of a single brain, where we have one of, if not the largest business process management and knowledge process outsourcing operations in the industry and in the country. So we do a lot of work with companies who need help facilitating back office processes, doing it in a more efficient way, doing it in a more cost-effective way. So we do a tremendous amount of work in the industry in the back office support. And the other half of the brain, which is really where I work, is software, technology, and solutions. And what we've tried to do is take a really holistic look and say, instead of deciding to be a point solution, where we know there's tons of really great vendors out in the market and companies who are thinking about single solutions, we've tried to differentiate ourselves by saying we're thinking about a lot of problems, and that these are not individual things that are completely disconnected, but that if you can have a single vendor with whom you're working that brings a lot of technology solutions together, then that's often a better outcome than lots of disparate and disconnected point solutions.
Sure, 100%. Being able to bring technology together and to work within a single, let's call it platform or brain, definitely makes things a lot easier in terms of passing information across what generally would become siloed type systems. Which brings us perfectly to our conversation today, which is a little bit more about omnichannel. And so it's like the big buzzword these days, right? Like omni-channel solutions. And then obviously with the complications of Reg F and communication limitations and those kinds of things, it's become a little bit more complex. And I know that you guys have the iConnect 24/7 platform that kind of helps both integrating website and chat and the telephone and everything else, the IVR systems, and kind of bringing together communications into a single platform. Can you tell us a little bit about like what it's like building an omni-channel solution these days, like an actual omni-channel solution, not just throwing out the buzzword?
Yeah, and it's interesting that you say that. Omni-channel is almost as overused as AI, right? It's just kind of the catch-all, right? What are you building? Oh, it's AI omni-channel, I promise, right? No, it's a really interesting challenge to that point, because
Sure.
What should you build? And what we've been able to do is, through the work that we've done in our other platforms, our compliance product, our speech analytics product, we've tried to decide what are the core problem statements that we're trying to address with omnichannel solutions.
Okay.
And what we really decided was that, number one, we had to look at this from a standing foundation of compliance, that
Mhm.
the whole idea of that experience with the consumer has to be compliant by design, right?
Mhm.
Fundamentally compliant, where they can't have a non-compliant interaction with your company.
Mhm.
And the other part of it was saying, what is the voice of the consumer? What are they actually calling about? What is the 80-20 rule? And
Mhm.
all of these reasons that consumers call, it tends to be, you see themes throughout the industry of why people call, but also at individual companies, there's a lot of specifics. So we can use that voice of the customer through speech analytics and say, here's what looks like a reasonable omni-channel path for you. Because what I'm really trying to do when I say omni-channel is I'm trying to give the consumer their way, their choice on how to resolve the situation, right? What's the path through which they want to get resolution?
So when we talk about omni-channel solutions, is there are you able to carry context between the individual channels?
Yeah, that's a great question. If this was a Family Feud, that'd be like kind of question most commonly given. Absolutely, right? And it's super important because I want to be able to have a single line of context and thread between a phone call or following up with a visit to the website or starting a chat with the agent to say, hey, I just saw this on my demographics. What does it mean? Or a text or email. So
Mhm.
very important to have that continuity in conversation, that an agent, when they're interacting with their customer and their consumer, can see all of those interactions and say, these aren't kind of disparate conversations. It's one conversation with different threads.
Okay, so as we talk about kind of siloed systems, right? And I think that's a good way to think about omni-channel. You've got a collection software, a system of record that is storing account information. You're generally going to have some sort of a dialer system, some sort of a phone system. You're going to have your website. You're going to have all these different tools and mechanisms by which a consumer is able to communicate to the end user. So, how are you guys kind of connecting into all of these different data points to bring that together?
Yeah, it's a great question, Adam. One of the things that we really, spent a lot of time thinking about and designing early days in iConnect 24/7 was, what should we build and where should we partner?
Mm.
A key problem that our clients kept bringing to us, and still today, prospects and clients will say, I need all of these things, or even sometimes I have all of these things, but I have to deal with 5 different companies.
Mhm.
So we had to kind of make that decision to say, well, should I really go ahead and build every single part of that technology stack, or should I decide what of those areas are really key for me to build together in terms of an interface and integrations and pulling those channels together, and be able to leverage other really high performing clients and partners in the industry to say there are SMS partners with whom I can work to have an ideal experience, right? Payment processors. I don't need to make you change your payment processor. If you have a great payment processor, that's great. Integrate them into this channel so that you have a single point of contact with your consumer and you don't have to make massive process changes internally. So that's how we've approached it, to say, what are the key things that consumers are telling us they want? The ability to chat. Some want to talk by email, some want to speak by text. Some don't want to talk at all and just want to log in, see my story, negotiate a payment, and get it done, right? E-signatures, document exchange, and then functional things that an agent can do with a consumer. Those were the core things that we wanted to address and build some technology internally, and some to say, like, let's just work with industry leading partners and bring in best of class, but under one roof.
Completely understood. Now, as we talk about payment negotiations, right? I think that's a really interesting topic because I've seen so many different organizations try and address this in different ways. How are you ultimately addressing the building of these business rules to allow for that type of online negotiation absent of a collector? And the reason I ask is, like, we talk about the compliance side of what you guys have done, and so as we talk about kind of compliance and those things, how do we start tying these pieces together in a compliant way? Because if we're able to remove the collector, then we're able to remove a lot of the compliance risk, right? Those
Yeah.
individual interactions that ultimately are upsetting a consumer. So how are you guys building those business rules and integrating not only what your client, right? So the agency, debt buyer, law firm is doing, but also looking at it from the perspective of all the individual client requirements or even portfolio level requirements that they're going to have to be dealing with.
Absolutely. So, the way we look at it, Adam, is that just like you said, my client would be the debt buyer, the agency, the law firm, and then what we would refer to from Provana's lens as the end client, right? The
Mhm.
ultimate client being served. That you have to tailor that program so that you can see and meet end client requirements and to do so in a compliant way. So the way we've tried to approach this is to say, how can we make the engine as flexible as possible? Because if I sit here and try and think about all of those permutations, examples, one-offs, this end client will be here forever, right? And
Sure.
you can't let perfect be the enemy of good enough to get going. So how do we start that with a foundation where we can allow our clients to be very flexible, to integrate multiple end client requirements? And so that's what we've tried to do with iConnect and say, listen, if client A, right, end client A has the following restrictions, right? So much of a percent over time, how much time, what kind of payments will they accept? Let's give you the options to configure that in a end client compliant way so that you can meet their expectations. And blocking and tackling compliance, it tends to be a heavier lift up front for an of counsel, for an in-house attorney to do that review. But once you've reviewed the platform, you're done, right? I mean, it's more a time and attention up front, but to say that I can actually review that platform and say, from a consumer perspective, as an in-house attorney or of counsel, I can say that that's now a compliant experience for the consumer.
Mhm.
That's it. Like, they can't have a non-compliant experience. And then to leverage that on top of this end client configurability to say, for this end client, I have these parameters, and within those parameters, I can allow the consumer to negotiate. And it can be different for different end clients with should they pay by ACH or card and all these different things. So we've tried to make it as flexible as possible, because if you and I sat here contemplating all the different ideas and ways that end clients could shift their payment negotiations, we'd be here forever.
Understood. So as we're looking at that kind of negotiation process, is that something that the end client is coming back to you and saying, okay, here's how I want to modify it? Or are they empowered within the platform to kind of make some of those modifications themselves so that they can spend more time and energy, or whatever amount of time and energy they ultimately want on that?
Yeah, it's a great question, Adam. I think it kind of goes back to, a core Provana mentality that I've really tried to ensure permeates all of our platforms, that I want to make sure that my clients are as empowered as possible to make their own choices, to drive their own decisions within the platforms, but each of the platforms are completely supported. So we have our customer success management teams, we have our product teams, and we actually push, maybe even to the point of being pushy, to say, meet with me every week, right? Even just a quick touch base.
Sure.
Are you getting the value? Are you hitting roadblocks? What are the challenges? What are the successes? And if you're getting stopped up at a point, let me help you get through that. But to the point, as much as possible, try and push that empowerment to the client.
Understood. So they've got that opportunity to go in there, and they've got the additional support, which is important, right? Because they don't always truly understand that connection. Now, I think web chat is one of those things that's become, considerably more important. And I know that you also have the IDAP platform, which is more analytics based and trying to extract intelligence from various pieces. Um,
Yep.
how does that tie into the omni-channel? Like, what kind of reporting and analytics are they able to use to continue to improve that experience for the end user customer?
Yeah, I love that question. Our analytics product is super robust in the sense that we can really attach to almost any data source and pull in all of these disparate, sources of data, normalize it, and put together common and easily accessible dashboards. So when you look at that with respect to iConnect 24/7 and the speech channel and the compliance channel, I can start to look at data that says, how do people pay me, right? What options do they tend to take advantage of? When I send SMS or email campaigns, what messages are working, what time of day do people tend to engage, right? If I send out a blast in the morning, afternoon, or evening, what's most likely to get an immediate click? What are response and delivery rates? Even when you start to correlate it against external scoring mechanisms, either internal or external scoring mechanisms, what type of scores, what type of consumers answer these messages? So by utilizing the analytics platform, we can just take this treasure trove of data, which, when we look at our omni-channel product, it's almost like, think about like an online shopping cart,
Mhm.
so that I even know when a consumer has come to the page, they've come all the way up to the point of saying pay now, and they don't, right?
Yep.
That's an item left in the shopping cart. Who's
Mhm.
doing that? How often? Is it correlated to certain profiles or opportunities, right? So those are the kind of things that we can expose in analytics and take all that data and make it actionable instead of just, compiling more and more data that's, that you can't figure out what to do with.
Data is only valuable if you can find ways to extract intelligence from that data, right? Like big treasure troves of information, that's great. But unless you can find correlations or draw value from it, then it really is just a giant
Yeah.
pile of data.
Interesting, but irrelevant.
Yeah, correct. Which
Yeah.
actually brings me to kind of my final question, which would be, I know from an analytics perspective and from a call perspective, you do some of this kind of call listening, call mining, and that process. How does that tie into the overall omni-channel opportunities?
Yeah, I love leaning into that message, because if you're not looking at both sides of your house,
Mhm.
then you're missing something. And I really want to make sure that all of these calls that are coming into the call center, every single one of them is a risk vector.
Mhm.
Every single phone call is a risk. So I want to understand from the actual call perspective, I want to understand, are my agents as good at their job as they can be? Right?
Mhm.
Are they as compliant? Are they as effective? Are they as productive? And those are the kind of things that we can identify through speech analytics.
Mhm.
And through that same process, we can actually say, well, what are the big reasons that they're calling? Are they tending to call to negotiate? Do you have a long, array of consumers who are just calling every single week to make the same payment every time? What are those tools that I can give my agent to now say, well, hey guys, you don't need to call, right? You can take care of this yourself. So we're trying to take that speech data and say, for the calls that happen, am I giving them the best experience?
Mhm.
And with the same at the same time saying, did that call need to happen? Right? Or is that a missed opportunity for that consumer to have a perfectly compliant self-serve experience? So that's how we leverage that data to say, is your omni-channel strategy the most effective? Are there different things that we can give to the agents as a tool to make that consumer a better consumer? They have more options to self-serve.
Well, it sounds like you have been looking at this omni-channel problem from a very holistic standpoint and a lot of different angles because it ultimately is the culmination of so many different angles. For those of you that are watching today, if you have additional questions you'd like to ask, feel free to leave them below in the comments here on YouTube and LinkedIn. Sean and I'd be happy to answer those questions going forward. If you have additional topics that you'd like to see Sean and I talk about, you can leave those in the comments as well. Sean, in the short term, I really appreciate you coming on today, having a chat with me. I always learn a little something from a conversation with you and looking forward to the next one.
Absolutely. Appreciate it, Adam. Great to be here.
For all of you watching, thank you so much for your time, and we'll talk to you again soon.